On Thanksgiving, my daughter called me a burden. This holiday's for family, not caretaking, she said, so I sold the house she was living in. I quietly signed the papers and left her the goodbye note. Thanksgiving morning smelled like cinnamon and regret. I was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hands deep in a mixing bowl of pecan filling, trying to salvage a pie crust that Angela had half-baked and then abandoned on the counter. She was never much of a cook, always too rushed, too distracted, too irritated, but it used to be endearing when she was a teenager. Now it just made the kitchen feel colder. I had just poured the filling into the crust when she stormed in, her heels clicking like judgment. She didn't look at me, just reached for the knife block and yanked the carving knife from its slot with a sharp metallic hiss. Then she turned toward me. "Jesus, Mom," she snapped. "You're like a mold in this house, quiet, useless, and slowly spreading guilt. This holiday's for family, not your guilt trips." I froze. The pie tin in my hands trembled slightly, and I set it down on the countertop before my fingers betrayed me. I didn't answer. Not with my mouth. My eyes, maybe. They always say my eyes speak, but not my lips. I simply looked at her. I looked at the woman I had once rocked to sleep in my arms, who used to beg me to stay a little longer when I tucked her in, who had clutched my dress at every doctor's appointment, every school recital. That little girl was long gone. All that remained now was something hollow and hard, dressed in designer blouses and carrying bitterness like a handbag. Angela wasn't done. She motioned toward the stove. "You just keep hovering like a ghost," she said, rolling her eyes. "You stand there acting like you're doing something. Making one dish doesn't count as helping, Mom. Honestly, it just clogs the kitchen." "I can make the gravy, too," I offered gently. She let out a bitter laugh. "What? So we can all die of boredom before it thickens? No, thank you." I turned back toward the oven and set the temperature. My hands moved on their own now, like they had for decades. Through diaper changes, through late-night meals, through sickbeds and first heartbreaks. I knew how to finish things, even when no one wanted me to. The guests arrived at 2. Brad's parents, equally cold but at least politely so, sat stiffly on the leather couch. Brad himself was already on his 3rd beer by the time we carved the turkey. Angela had dressed the table with the good plates and the napkins I embroidered years ago, though she had cut off the tags where my initials used to be. Dinner was loud. The kids bickered over the last crescent roll. Angela told a story about her new promotion and how exhausting it was to manage incompetent people. Brad chimed in with a crude joke about interns and low-cut blouses. I chewed slowly, quietly, watching the gravy pool into my mashed potato. Then came the moment that would lodge itself into the softest part of me. Brad clinked his fork against his glass. "Let's give thanks, huh?" he said, grinning. "I'm thankful that my wife still looks amazing even with stress lines, that my son didn't break anything this week, and that we managed to pull off dinner without calling a fire truck." Everyone chuckled. He turned toward me, beer in hand. "And maybe next year," he said with a smirk, "we'll be lucky enough to have you in a box and not at the dinner table." The table fell silent for half a second, then burst into laughter. Angela actually snorted. I didn't laugh. I felt my fingers tighten around my fork. I set it down, straightened my back, and looked around the table. That was when Lily, the 13-year-old, added with a smirk, "Grandma smells like old cheese and depression." There it was, a punch from a child. Not even hers. Mine. My chest didn't tighten. My face didn't twist. I simply looked at her, a child I had rocked in my arms when Angela went back to work 6 weeks after giving birth. I had bathed her in the sink. I had read her bedtime stories and folded her tiny socks. Angela didn't correct her. She didn't even look up. I stood from the table slowly. My chair made a soft scraping sound against the hardwood floor. No one noticed. No one paused. The cranberry sauce had taken center stage now, and the next joke was already being formed. I walked up the stairs, each step somehow heavier than the last. Not from age, no, from disappointment. Not in them, in myself. When I reached the bedroom, I locked the door and stood still for a long moment. The mirror on the dresser caught my reflection. Soft lines, gray hair pinned back neatly, cardigan buttoned one off-kilter. I looked like someone's mother, someone's burden. I opened the old cedar chest at the foot of the bed. The smell of lavender and thyme escaped like a secret. Beneath a quilt, folded with care, was a black leather folder. Inside it, the deed to the house in my name. The copy of the lease Angela signed, agreeing to pay $1 a year for 10 years. My idea of mercy. She never paid a cent. There was also a document signed just months ago, a sale agreement, precinct, with a clause for immediate execution should I choose to vacate. Raymond had drawn it up for me, just in case, he said. A contingency. A parachute. I sat on the edge of the bed, folder in hand, and finally, for the first time in years, allowed myself to feel not grief, but resolve. Downstairs, laughter roared again. Someone knocked over a glass. Angela's voice called up half-heartedly, "Mom, do you have more napkins?" I didn't answer. I was already packing. The house always fell into a strange hush at night, as though even its beams and bricks knew how to keep secrets. Downstairs, muffled laughter still echoed faintly. Angela and Brad watching reruns on the big screen TV I helped pay for. The kids were bickering over screen time. No one noticed I had not returned after dinner. No one came to check. I sat at the edge of my bed for a while, letting the silence thicken around me. The leather folder still rested on my lap. I ran my fingers over its spine, then stood up and walked to the far wall of the bedroom where the old dresser stood like a guardian of forgotten things. Hidden behind the bottom drawer was a small safe, wedged into the wall and painted over once in a rushed attempt to modernize. It had been untouched for years. I entered the code slowly, carefully. 10/24, my wedding anniversary. The door clicked open with a tired sigh. Inside was a manila envelope, aged but clean, sealed with a red string. I drew it out and laid it gently on the bed next to the folder. From within came the deed to the house, still in my name. People forget, or maybe they never understand, the difference between living in a home and owning one. Angela thought that because I never brought it up, it had somehow become hers. She used to say, "You're lucky I let you stay here," never realizing I could have said the same thing back. But I never did. Not until now. Beneath the deed was a second document, a lease agreement, signed and notarized, dated 4 years ago when Brad's debts nearly took them under. I had offered them a deal, a symbolic rent of $1 per year, renewable by my grace. I remembered how Angela laughed when she signed it, saying, "We'll never actually need this, but sure, Mom." She had no idea I had kept the original, filed legally, stamped with blue ink and sealed, with a clause of eviction under breach of respect or safety. Another suggestion from Raymond, who never quite stopped looking out for me. Raymond Dale. The name lingered like something floral on a cold wind. We met in college, where he studied law and I studied literature. He was the first man to ever say, "I made silence feel beautiful." We had plans. Big ones. A wedding in Maine, a life in New York. But then my father fell ill and I came back to care for him. Raymond waited for a year, then he moved on. 43 years and 1,000 regrets later, I picked up the phone. I dialed the number he had written into the back of a Christmas card 5 years ago. It had said simply, "If you ever need a way out, call." The phone rang once, twice, then, "This is Raymond." His voice was deeper now, rougher around the edges, but still calm, still warm. I said nothing for a moment. Then, "Raymond, it's Mary." There was a pause, then a small inhale. "Mary Wallace," he said slowly, as if tasting the years. "Is this about them again?" I closed my eyes. "It's about peace," I said. "I'd like to reclaim it." He didn't ask more. He never did when it mattered. "Come in tomorrow," he said. 9 o'clock, same office, just a better view. I'll handle everything." I thanked him and hung up. Outside the window, the wind moved through the old oak tree, its branches scratching the glass like memory trying to come in. I packed a small overnight bag, just clothes, a framed photo of my husband and me on our wedding day, and the folder with the papers. No jewelry, no keepsakes. Everything else could be replaced or left behind. I had no need to carry the weight of furniture that no longer welcomed me. Downstairs, someone opened the fridge. A soda hissed open. Brad's voice echoed faintly. "I told your mom to stop putting her old stuff on the top shelf. Smells like mothballs." I folded a sweater carefully and placed it on top of the bag. Then I sat down and wrote a note. Not the note, not yet. That would come later. This one was just for me. I jotted a list. Raymond at 9. Get sale, contract notarized. Cancel utilities in my name. New address, TBD. Leave the pie on the counter. I stared at the last line for a long time, then smiled. Sleep did not come easily that night, but it came. Around 1 a.m. I slipped into it like slipping under cold water, uncomfortable, necessary, and strangely clean. The next morning I woke before the sun. I moved through the house quietly. I baked another pie, this time apple. I left it cooling on the counter. Then I wrote the real note, the one I would leave behind when it was all done. I did not sign it, Mom. I signed it, Mary. I closed the front door gently behind me and stepped into the chill of Thanksgiving morning, the world still hushed, the sky painted in watercolor grays and pinks. A silver car waited in the driveway, a ride I had ordered under a new account so they wouldn't see. The driver was a young man, polite but curious. Headed anywhere special today, ma'am? I looked out at the empty street, my house shrinking behind us in the mirror. Yes, I said, somewhere I should have gone a long time ago. Morning light spilled in through the sheer curtains as I zipped the final pocket on my overnight bag. The house was still asleep. No footsteps upstairs, no bathroom door creaking, no kitchen clatter. Just the low hum of the heater and the ticking wall clock beside the staircase. I had already showered, dressed, and packed by the time the Uber texted that it was 5 minutes away. My fingers hesitated briefly over a small box on the nightstand. Mahogany, hand-carved, with a soft satin lining inside. I opened it and placed 3 items within: the signed deed of sale, the cancellation of the lease, and my letter. Then I walked downstairs, quiet as fog. Angela had left her shoes scattered at the foot of the stairs again, one heel hanging off the last step like a half-formed thought. Brad's jacket lay slung over the banister. An empty beer bottle sat beside the TV remote. There was a smell of old pizza, dryer sheets, and something else. Maybe the scent of a family that had outgrown its soul. I placed the box carefully in the center of the dining table, where last night's laughter had bloomed like a weed. I folded the napkin beneath it, embroidered with the initials M.W., and tucked the smallest corner of the letter under the lid. I didn't cry. I hadn't cried in months, maybe years. I just stood still for a moment and looked around that kitchen, that living room, those walls I had painted, that fireplace I once lit during Angela's chickenpox fever, that window I had stared through while holding my first grandchild. None of it belonged to me now. It never had. I stepped out the side door with my bag slung over one shoulder and closed it gently, careful not to let it slam. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of cedar and wood smoke. Thanksgiving morning. Most houses were just waking up, kitchen lights flicking on, someone lighting a stove, children tugging on blankets. Mine would not notice I was gone for hours. The Uber arrived right on time, a gray sedan, with a driver who looked no older than my youngest student had been back when I taught 8th grade English. He smiled and took my bag. "Mary, right? Heading to downtown?" I nodded. "Just to the notary office." We drove in silence most of the way. Outside, the town blurred past. A drugstore, a closed diner with a handwritten Happy Thanksgiving sign, a boy riding a bike with 2 flat tires. I watched it all like someone watching a movie they'd already seen but forgotten the ending to. Raymond's office was on the 5th floor of a newer building tucked between 2 banks. It had polished floors, a calm receptionist, and walls lined with books, real ones, not decorative, not for show. I saw a framed photo of him with a horse, another with a vineyard, a third of him standing beside a boy who looked just like him. A son, maybe, or a student. I never asked. The receptionist smiled warmly. "Mr. Dale is expecting you. You can go right in." The door creaked slightly when I pushed it open, and there he was. Raymond stood from behind his desk, taller than I remembered, his hair now fully silver, but his eyes the same soft brown that had once watched me quote Emily Dickinson from the back of a pickup truck. He didn't greet me with a hug or a handshake. He simply said, "I brewed the good coffee, the one you liked." I smiled. "You remembered. Always." We sat at the small round table in the corner of the room. He passed me a folder. I opened it. Everything was in order. Notarized documents, signatures, banking slips. The sale was clean, fast, and final. The transaction would officially finalize the next business day, per the standard 24-hour processing window, which gave me just enough time to disappear without raising alarm. I've transferred the funds to your account, he said. But more importantly, this is the address of the ranch. He slid over a printed sheet. You can come today. The guest house is ready, unless you want to stay in the main house. I looked up at him, surprised. I was serious when I said the offer stands, he said, eyes steady. Stay as long as you like, as long as you need, or forever. You choose. I swallowed, then nodded. Thank you. I think I'll take you up on that. We didn't talk about Angela, not directly, but before I left, as he walked me to the elevator, he paused. You waited too long, Mary, but you didn't miss your moment. That matters. I wasn't waiting, I said softly. I was hoping. He nodded. Same thing, sometimes. By the time I returned to the neighborhood, it was nearly noon. The Uber dropped me off 1 block away so I could walk the rest. I took the long way past the park, the elementary school, the bakery that used to sell the apple fritters Angela loved as a child. The street was quiet now, most cars parked, most curtains drawn back. As I approached the house, no, their house, I felt no pain, no nostalgia, just clarity. I slipped the key from my coat pocket and placed it inside the mailbox. I stepped back, looked up at the windows where I had once taped up paper snowflakes and birthday banners, then turned away for the last time. Inside the house, eventually, Angela would wake up to the smell of pie but no footsteps. She would find the box on the table, open it, read, Happy Thanksgiving. You said this house wasn't mine, now it's not yours either, Mary. And maybe, just maybe, she would understand what it felt like to be invisible, to be needed but never wanted, to be there but never truly seen. But by then I'd be long gone, toward peace, toward horses and grapes, and maybe, if life was kind this time, toward someone who remembered how I liked my coffee. Angela's scream echoed through the house like an alarm going off in a cathedral. It happened around 11:30 a.m., just after she'd finished her second cup of coffee and wandered into the dining room looking for the leftover pie. Instead, she found the box. Brad heard her before he saw her, heard the sharp shatter of glass, the thud of her fist on the table, the sound of a chair thrown sideways. He came in groggy, rubbing his temple from last night's beer, only to find his wife, red-faced, clutching a piece of paper in one hand, her mouth twisted into a snarl. She sold the goddamn house, Angela shrieked. She sold it to some old boyfriend and ran off like some kind of dramatic princess. Brad blinked. Wait, what? Angela shoved the documents into his chest. Read it. Read every last word. She signed it. It's done. We're out. We're homeless. He skimmed the paperwork, confused but quiet. It was all legal, stamped, notarized, and most damning of all, dated 2 weeks ago. Angela began pacing. That old witch. She tricked us, pretended to be this sweet, senile, baking grandma when she was planning this the whole time. She's not even confused. She's evil. She grabbed her phone from the counter and dialed. Brad just watched as she put the phone on speaker. Hi, Mr. Colton. It's Angela Carson. Yes, I need urgent legal representation. My mother. She's in mental decline. She signed away the house under what I believe is manipulation and confusion. She was not of sound mind. I think she's being financially abused by someone, maybe an old boyfriend. Yes, elder abuse. We need to challenge the sale and freeze the transfer of ownership immediately. Brad frowned but said nothing. Angela continued, piling lie on lie like bricks in a wall. She didn't even remember my birthday this year. She confuses the kids' names. She thinks the year is 2014 sometimes. No, she doesn't have dementia, but she has episodes. It's documented. I can get a neighbor to confirm. And she left us with no housing. It's negligence. It's theft. The call ended. Angela dropped the phone on the counter, chest heaving. Brad picked it up and read the last call log, a 16-minute conversation with a law firm she used once in a custody dispute with her ex. Then she texted someone quickly. He caught a glimpse of the name Marla, her best friend since high school. Her message read, If the courts don't fix it, maybe stairs will. Brad froze. Angela didn't notice. She tossed the phone aside and began throwing cookbooks into a trash bag. She thinks this is some kind of lesson? That she can humiliate me and ride off into the Truxas sunset with a lawyer and a bottle of red wine? Brad stared at the phone, rereading the message. His heart beat slower, louder. He sat down. You know, he said finally, I never asked how this house got paid for. Angela looked up. What? The down payment, the remodel, the new kitchen, that came from your mom, didn't it? Angela rolled her eyes. She offered. What, you're on her side now? Brad's voice was low. No, I'm just remembering. She helped us after my back surgery, paid 3 months of mortgage when I lost my job, bought Lily's braces, covered the electric when we couldn't. And you? You call her fungus. Angela's expression hardened. Don't start this now. But Brad wasn't done. You told her she smelled like old books. You laughed when the kids mocked her. And now you're texting your friend with what? Thinly veiled murder plots? Angela's jaw clenched. It was a joke. Was it? Brad stood up. He wasn't yelling, not yet, but something had shifted in the room. The air felt heavier. You ever think maybe she got tired of being the doormat? That maybe she left because it's the only thing she could still control? Angela stormed toward him. We needed that house. No, Brad said, his voice suddenly firmer than she'd heard in years. You needed her to stay small, so you could feel big. She slapped the counter. So what, you're defending her now? She abandoned us. Brad shook his head slowly. No, Angela, she finally stopped being your hostage. For the first time in hours, Angela had no reply. She just stood there, breathing hard, staring at him like he was someone she no longer recognized. Brad picked up her phone, took a screenshot of the message to Marla, then slipped the phone into his pocket. What are you doing? She asked. I'm going to the sheriff's office, he said simply. You need help, but not the kind a court can give you. I'm not going to be part of this anymore. Angela's mouth fell open. You would turn on me? I would protect the woman who protected us when no one else would. He walked to the door. Tell the kids I'll call them tomorrow, and tell your lawyer good luck explaining this message to a judge. He closed the door behind him without slamming it, just a soft click, barely louder than a whisper. Angela stood alone in the middle of the kitchen, trembling. The walls around her, the ones she thought she owned, suddenly felt unfamiliar. She picked up the letter again. Read it. Happy Thanksgiving. You said this house wasn't mine. Now it's not yours either. And for the first time in her adult life, Angela Carson realized what true loneliness felt like. Not absence, but consequence. Brad stood in the parking lot outside the sheriff's office, the cool November wind cutting through his jacket. The phone felt heavy in his hand. He'd replayed the voicemail twice already, the text message even more times. Angela's voice, casual and venomous, now lived in his memory in a way he could never scrub out. He took a deep breath, then walked inside. It hadn't been an easy decision. For years he had turned a blind eye, letting sarcasm pass for parenting and cruelty hide behind tradition. But something had shifted. He had seen too much for too long, and silence now would be its own kind of guilt. The officer at the front desk looked up as he approached. Can I help you? Yes, Brad said. I'd like to report a potential premeditated assault and possibly elder abuse. I have evidence. It started there. Brad gave a full statement. He played the voicemail of Angela's call to Marla, where she said plainly, if the courts don't fix it, maybe stairs will. He handed over screenshots of her texts, including one that read, she's ancient, Brad won't stop her, and one accident would solve everything. And he handed over something else, Angela's past emails to her lawyer, which he'd found on the shared laptop. In them, she crafted a narrative that Mary was mentally declining, referenced false medical claims, and even attached photos of old pill bottles she planned to plant in Mary's room to strengthen her case. She's setting her up, Brad had told the detective, and if she doesn't win in court, she'll try to win by force. The next morning, a formal petition was filed with the local court. Judge Miriam Rusk, a stern woman known for her zero tolerance toward elder exploitation, reviewed the submission. Given the potential for harm and the clear, documented evidence, she called an emergency hearing. Mary sat quietly beside Raymond in the courtroom 3 days later. The walls were tall and white, the lighting clean and clinical. She wore a dark blue coat, her hair tied neatly back. Her hands were folded in her lap, trembling only slightly. Angela sat at the defendant's table, dressed in a blazer too tight for humility. Her hair was straightened, her makeup flawless, but her eyes darted, flicked, trembled. Brad sat behind Mary, staring ahead. His jaw clenched every time Angela glanced his way. Judge Rusk called the hearing to order. The prosecution presented first. Raymond rose slowly, confidently, holding a file thick with printed pages, digital transcripts, and notarized documents. "Your Honor," he began, "this is not a dispute over property. This is a pattern of psychological manipulation, financial exploitation, and, most disturbingly, intent to commit physical harm toward an elderly woman. My client, Mrs. Mary Wallace, has not only been vilified and used by her daughter for years, but was nearly the victim of a calculated act of violence." He handed the judge the lease agreement Mary had drawn up with Angela, signed, witnessed, and notarized 4 years earlier. Despite this lease, which legally designates Mrs. Wallace as landlord and grants no ownership of the property to the defendant, Ms. Carson attempted to reverse the home's sale using claims of mental incompetence, without any medical evaluation or history, because she had none. He then submitted the sale contract to Raymond, dated, signed, and transferred legally with all rights. Then came the text messages, the voicemails, the emails. He even played the audio aloud in the courtroom. Angela's voice echoed, "She's not going to last much longer anyway. Might as well help nature along. I mean, one slip on the stairs, who would even question it?" The room fell into stunned silence. Angela turned pale. Her attorney, hired hastily, tried to object on technical grounds, but the judge cut him off. "Enough," Judge Rusk said, slamming the gavel once. "This court has seen sufficient evidence to proceed with charges. Angela Carson, you are hereby charged with attempted solicitation of assault on a vulnerable adult, fabrication of medical incapacity, and deliberate intent to commit fraud and emotional abuse. The court recommends full criminal prosecution." Angela stood up, voice shaking. "He set me up. He's lying." Judge Rusk raised an eyebrow. "Your husband? The father of your children? The man who has no gain in this other than his own moral conscience?" Angela stammered. "She manipulated all of us. She made me feel crazy." Mary didn't flinch. She just sat there, still and calm. For once, she didn't have to defend herself. The truth was speaking now. The judge turned to the bailiff. "Take her into custody. Sentence will be formalized following criminal trial, but bond is denied." As the bailiff stepped forward, Angela shrieked. "You all want to paint her as some saint? She's nothing. A parasite. She bakes pies and plays victim, and now I'm the villain?" Her voice cracked into sobs as she was led out of the courtroom in cuffs. The room fell into a heavy silence. Then Raymond stood and turned to Mary. "It's done," he whispered. Mary nodded. Her eyes were glossy but dry. As they turned to leave, Brad stood up. He walked around the benches past the guard and stopped in front of Mary. Everyone paused. Brad took off his hat. He looked older than he had just weeks ago, but there was a steadiness in him now, a man who had made a choice. "I let it happen," he said. "All these years. I watched her tear into you. I laughed at the jokes. I let the kids do it too. And you never hit back. You just made dinner." Mary looked at him without resentment, only patience. Brad stepped forward. "You gave me shelter. She gave me shame. I choose you." Then, quietly, he knelt just for a moment and kissed her hand. It was the kind of apology that doesn't need permission to be received. Mary simply whispered, "Thank you, Brad." And in her voice, there was something that sounded almost like closure. The courtroom was still as they left, the heels of Mary's shoes tapping gently on the floor like punctuation on a chapter that had taken a lifetime to write. The hill country wasn't just quiet, it was healing, the kind of stillness that didn't feel empty, but deliberate, purposeful. The way the wind moved through the tall grass, the way the sun touched the tops of the sycamore trees at dawn, it all spoke a language I hadn't heard in years, a language that said, "You're safe now." Raymond's ranch was tucked away down a gravel road, about 45 minutes from the nearest town. Horses roamed the fields, slow and free. Vines curled along the fences, their purple grapes swelling in the late fall sun. The ranch house itself was modest but warm, its stone foundation old and proud, its porch wide and welcoming. He gave me the guest house out back, 1 bedroom, a writing desk by the window, a clawfoot tub that creaked when the wind changed, and a porch swing that swayed even when I wasn't in it. At first, I thought I'd just stay for a week or two. Then I found myself planting rosemary in the side garden, then repainting the shutters, then helping him reorganize the barn. One day bled into the next. like melted butter on warm cornbread. I didn't want to leave. We never talked about marriage. Not because we were too old, but because we were finally too honest. We didn't need it. Raymond started calling me his partner in peace, and that felt more real than anything we could have signed in a courthouse. It was Raymond who had the idea first. "You know," he said one evening as we sat on the porch, sipping coffee while the stars blinked above us, "there are women out there just like you, women who get treated like old furniture, who get left behind in homes they helped build." I looked out at the quiet field beyond the vineyard. "I know. I used to be one of them." He nodded. "Let's do something about it." That winter, we converted the old barn into a 3-room cottage with a common kitchen and a wide deck. Then we added another cabin. Then a third. Word spread faster than we expected. At first, it was just a friend of a friend who needed a place after her son moved his new wife into her bedroom. Then it was a former nurse whose daughter locked her out during Christmas. Then another. And another. We named it Mary's Porch. It wasn't a shelter. It was a place to begin again. No rules, no curfews, no check-ins, just hot meals, warm blankets, and listening ears. We grew vegetables. We painted. We wrote letters we never sent. We sat under the stars and told stories we hadn't dared to speak out loud in years. I didn't plan on becoming a symbol, but the newspaper ran a piece one Sunday. "From exile to empowerment, one woman's porch becomes a sanctuary for the forgotten." We started getting mail. Some of it was hate, angry children who said we were turning their mothers against them. But most of it was thanks. Quiet, trembling thanks from women who finally felt seen. One envelope stood out, pale blue, addressed in careful handwriting. Inside was a letter on floral stationery, folded 3 times and tucked with a photo of a young girl holding a violin. "Dear Grandma, I don't expect you to forgive my mother. I don't forgive her either. I didn't know what was happening. I was 13 and stupid and wanted to be funny. But I was cruel. I remember the pie you made that night. I never told anyone, but I had a second slice after everyone went to bed. I snuck down and ate it cold, with my fingers. I didn't know what you had done until Aunt Marla came over screaming. Then Mom was gone. Then Dad. Then everything got quiet. I live with Aunt Kelly now. It's not bad, but it's not home. I saw the article about Mary's Porch. I recognized your smile. Would you let me volunteer there? I want to help. I want to learn what I didn't when it mattered, Lily." I stared at that letter for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. It was honest. Wobbly, unsure, but sincere. I didn't write back, not right away, not because I was angry, but because some bridges need time. And some healing must be chosen, not offered. Instead, I baked cinnamon apple pie, the same kind I made that Thanksgiving morning before the world cracked open. I wrapped it in a towel, still warm, and placed it in a small box. I included no return address, only a folded card inside. "You'll know better than them if you walk your own path." Weeks passed. Then one morning, as I poured coffee into a tin mug and stepped onto the porch, I saw a girl in a denim jacket standing by the gate. She had a violin case slung over one shoulder and a shy look in her eyes. She didn't speak right away. I didn't rush her. Finally, she lifted her hand in a half wave. I nodded, and that was enough. Now she comes every weekend. She plays music during Sunday suppers. She helps plant the garden. She listens more than she speaks. The women love her. They don't call her Lily, they call her Patch, because she said she's just trying to patch the hole she made. She smiled when they gave her that name. I smiled too. I sit on the porch every evening, watching the sky turn purple and gold, listening to the wind through the wheat and the hum of laughter behind me. Raymond brings me tea at sundown. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we sit in silence. He tells people I saved him from retirement boredom. I tell people he saved me from disappearing. Neither of us is lying. I used to think peace was something that happened when the pain stopped, but now I know it's what you build when you choose not to pass the pain forward. So I built a porch, and women came, and together we stopped shrinking. Angela had always hated silence. Even as a child, she filled every room with noise, demanding, complaining, pushing. It was how she felt seen, how she measured her existence. But prison didn't care. In the women's correctional facility outside Austin, silence wasn't just common, it was enforced. Angela learned quickly that shouting got you nowhere. Inmates had their own rhythm, their own justice, their own way of sniffing out a fraud. And Angela Carson, with her designer glasses and condescending glare, didn't last long as someone to be feared or followed. The other women called her royalty, but not kindly. The ones she tried to manipulate saw through her fast. She cried about being set up, whined about how my mother turned my own husband against me, and begged anyone who would listen to understand that she was the victim. But the more she spoke, the more she isolated herself. Even the guards stopped giving her the time of day. After 3 months, both of her children stopped writing. Lily, her oldest, sent a single letter that said, "I'm safe, I'm with people who care. Don't contact me again unless it's to say you're sorry." Angela tore it to shreds. Her youngest son, Ethan, had gone quiet even before the sentencing. He was only 9 when she was arrested. After a failed attempt at living with a family friend, Brad had taken full custody. He never answered her letters either. The guards told her one day, casually, that Ethan had been caught shoplifting at a gas station. Not out of need, just to be seen. They said he was sent to juvenile rehab. Angela asked if she could send him a gift. They said no. He was listed under restricted contacts. Angela stopped eating for 3 days, then started again. There was no point in starving. No one would care. She held on to one thing, hope that her lawyers could still find a loophole, that something about the mental capacity claims would stick, that the sale of the house might be reversed, that she might get something, anything, back. And then, one Thursday afternoon, just after lights out in the yard, her name was called over the speaker. Carson. Mail. She rushed to the desk, expecting a letter from her lawyer, maybe even Brad finally realizing his mistake. Instead, she was handed a stiff manila envelope stamped with the seal of a property development firm. Her heart raced as she opened it. Inside was a formal notice. Miss Angela Carson, we are writing to inform you that the property located at 218 Sycamore Lane has officially been repurposed under the guidance of Mary's Porch Foundation and Hill Country Legal Trust. As of last week, the property is no longer listed as private residence. It is now legally and permanently designated as a community center dedicated to housing and rehabilitating elder women experiencing family abandonment or abuse. Furthermore, due to your previous conviction and behavioral risk assessment, you are formally restricted from approaching within 500 feet of the property. Any attempt to make contact with personnel or residents at the location will be considered a violation of parole upon your release. We wish you a peaceful rehabilitation. Angela read it 3 times, lips trembling, vision swimming. She laughed once, short, bitter, a dry bark that startled the woman in the bunk across from hers. Then she slammed the envelope on the metal table, stood up, and screamed at the top of her lungs. "That witch ruined me!" No one answered. The guard on duty didn't even flinch. He just leaned against the wall and sipped his coffee. Angela was sent to solitary for the outburst, 48 hours in a concrete box with nothing but her thoughts. She screamed again, softer on the second night, but it wasn't the same kind of rage. It was thinner now, desperate, cracked, because deep down she knew Mary hadn't ruined her. She had done that all by herself. Outside, in the world she no longer controlled, things moved forward, slowly, but with intention. Brad rented a modest home in a quiet neighborhood near the edge of town. The yard was patchy, the dishwasher rattled, but it was home. He didn't have much, but he had peace. He framed a photo of Mary and placed it on the windowsill above the kitchen sink, not out of guilt, but gratitude. Every Sunday he wrote her a letter, even if it was short. Lily still volunteered at Mary's Porch. She started a music program for the older women, called it Strings and Stories. On warm afternoons, you could hear the soft sound of violin echoing through the garden, mixing with laughter and the clink of teacups. She never talked about her mother, not out of hatred, out of distance. Ethan returned from the youth rehab program with quieter eyes. He planted carrots in the school garden and read books about astronomy. He didn't ask about his mom anymore. Only asked Brad once if Grandma still made those pies. Brad said she probably did, and maybe one day they'd taste one again. Back in her cell, Angela was allowed out after 48 hours. She didn't speak for days. She just sat on the edge of her cot, staring at the floor, lips moving silently. The envelope still sat on her shelf. She hadn't thrown it away. She hadn't burned it. She read it every night, and every time she did, the part that stung the most wasn't the legal order. It was the name. Mary's Porch. Not Wallace House, not Sycamore Retreat, not even the Carson Center, something she might have imagined in her days of vanity. It was Mary's. The woman she'd mocked, belittled, pushed. And now, Mary's name was a landmark, a legacy. Angela's name, a cautionary footnote. No one remembered who built the kitchen, or painted the walls, or laughed at the Thanksgiving table that night. All they remembered now was who left and who stayed, who gave and who tried to destroy. Angela Carson wasn't just in prison. She had become the very thing she feared most. Irrelevant. The headline sat in bold above the fold of the Sunday edition of the Hill County Gazette, flanked by a sepia photo of me sitting on the porch swing, a mug of tea in one hand, a gray cat curled by my feet. "Don't call me a burden, my shoulders built this house," by Mary Wallace. It wasn't the kind of piece people usually expected from an old woman. It wasn't a recipe column or a nostalgic tale about the good old days. It was a reckoning, a story too many women live and too few tell. I started with the truth, not the kind shaped by bitterness, but the kind polished by time. I wrote about how I raised a daughter who grew up believing love was measured in what you could take, not what you gave. I wrote about how I made her school costumes by hand, worked night shifts to cover her college fund, and gave up a second chance at happiness to stay and help her raise her own children. And I wrote about the silence, the kind that grows when you let yourself be erased slowly, day by day, until one Thanksgiving you realize you're just the hands that serve the food, not the name on anyone's heart. I wrote how the jokes started small. "She's just old-fashioned. She forgets things sometimes. She always has an opinion, doesn't she?" Until one day, your presence becomes a burden, your voice an inconvenience, your care a weapon turned against you. And the people you gave everything to hand you nothing but a paper plate and a seat by the trash can. That was the year I stood up and walked away. No screaming, no plates thrown, just quiet action, legal truth, and the unshakable knowledge that my value did not end when they stopped appreciating it. I sold the house I paid for. I walked away from the family I built. I chose myself for the first time in 74 years, and the world didn't fall apart. It opened. Raymond says the article will ruffle feathers, that some might call me vindictive, that others will accuse me of airing family laundry. Let them. Because for every woman who reads this and says, "This is my story too," I know it was worth it. I know what people think of women like me. We're supposed to be quiet, grateful, soft-spoken, even when we're bleeding. We're not supposed to fight back. We're supposed to nod, smile, and vanish gently into someone else's spare room. But I didn't. And now, there's a porch with my name on it, and laughter again in my lungs. They called me a burden, but my shoulders built the house they now remember with longing. Now I sit in the evenings with my tea, the scent of rosemary in the air, a young girl playing violin under the trees, and women who once felt invisible now shining like stars return to the sky. I did not burn bridges, I built new roads, and I finally understand what Thanksgiving is meant to be. Not obligation, not performance, not pain dressed as tradition. Thanksgiving is about family, but sometimes you must burn the table to build your own. Thank you for listening to Mary's story, a journey of heartbreak, strength, and quiet triumph. If you've ever felt like you were pushed aside, silenced, or treated like a burden by the very people you once carried through life, know this: you are not alone. You are not weak for loving too much. You are not forgotten because you chose to give, and your story matters, now more than ever. Here on Grandma True Stories, we honor the voices that were once whispered and now deserve to be heard loud and clear. If Mary's story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of someone you love, click that subscribe button and join our growing community. Every week, we bring you true stories of resilience, justice, and long overdue redemption from the women who were never meant to fade away. Because sometimes the quietest voices carry the deepest truths, and sometimes you have to burn the table to build your own. Welcome to Grandma, True Stories, where the past speaks and the world listens.